So I wasn't imagining things when I saw my Himeko did very little damage against this boss, well, these boss. Regardless of what I run a crit build or break build on her. The enemy has gotten beefier than before. I'm kinda late to the party because of other video I have been making, but I still would like to add a little something to an already dead topic of discussion. In no way, shape or form just increasing HP is the way to balance or increase difficulty in any game ever. But with JRPG, that seems like an inevitable thing that people have come to accept, since the entire genre can be boiled down to two parts. 1. A glorified long-ass simple, or in some case, complicated calculation formula. 2. Strategies. Normally, with a finished JRPG, this isn't really a problem, because everything you need to beat, even the highest difficulty, is available in the game, and the more linear structure with a clear endpoint help limit how crazy the numbers can be. But Star Rail being a live service gacha game doesn't have that benefits, and on top of that, its endgame contents are DPS check, which in itself isn't really a bad thing. But because of it is a live service gacha game, it has to make money one way or another. So the only real limit on this front is developer or publisher greediness. I believe this HP inflation is a knee-jerk reaction from here, whether it's because they want to maintain MOC status quo of being the endgame content, and thus it has to be somewhat challenging, or there is some statistics show more people can consistently 36-star MOC has a correlation with lower revenue. The matter that I have zero idea. I don't know what's truly going on with Star Rail director, producer, shareholder and designer. Whatever might be the case, the result of that decision has negative effects on all of us. But before I talk about should we press the go back button or something along the line, I think we should start with the source of the problem. Or, well, at least, some might perceive them as the source of the problem. Am I insinuating these two units are the reason? Yes, partially. What? Do you expect my usual? Well, actually, no, not really. With how overloaded and universal these two units are, it kinda has to be these two to be pointed at. I'm not that much of a contrarian to say an SP positive support unit that can provide 68% damage buff, 25% all-type burst pen, 50% weakness break efficiency, 20% break effect, delay weakness broken enemy's turn, or another support unit that advances your entire party turn on top of provide robillion damage are not an issue. Any unit that can take advantage of these two, or well, let's face it, built with these two in mind, will deal so much damage to the point that team can turn the game into a dog walking simulator. I mean, just look at the current top 3 teams on Pridewin. Just to be clear here, I'm not a tier whore, I don't follow meta, but I have to use something as reference, and this is the easiest that I know of. We have follow-up attack kinda tied with break, then followed by Yomi team, as cute as it is because this is the HP inflated MOC. But in my opinion, the bigger problem than these two units and their team being super broken is Star Rail developer's decision to balance things around the top tier stuff in the worst way possible. It's not uncommon to balance things around the best stuff of that time since it is the easiest point of reference. If anything, just look at any competitive online game with esports scene. It's the most effective things available. It is logical to balance your game around that because everyone in their mother is going to use it. Well, majority of the player will use it. Am I insinuating this is the wrong way? Of course not! Every approach has ups and downs. Also, if you're wondering why I use this exact transition so wise, Shinjin and producer went back to their country, so I don't have anyone to help me with the transition. No, where was that again? Oh, ups and downs. The downside of balancing around top tier things is that if the developer team are not careful or don't think things through, all of the non-meta stuff will fall off into obscurity, and Star Rail is exactly that. I have no problem if they balance things to play around the idea of player using teal woman and white woman, but I have problem when we use these two women of colors as a baseline, assume everyone has either or both of them, and has their best team in a somewhat playable state. Isn't that like the same thing, just worded differently? Yeah, that's kinda true. But I'll give an example of what I mean a bit later after I talk about another factor of this reaction. That is these broken damage dealers. Even though these units are broken, they still have some limitations, mainly the archetype they are meant to be a part of and the synergy within their team. Yomi is undeniably brain dead busted. But she needs other teammates to battery her ultimate, and the team damage comes from her alone. Hotaru can brute force every content, but she needs Harmony Trailblazer or Firewin to maximize her damage potential. Facial needs other follow-up units, or at the very least, someone to advance her next action to battery her ultimate. But still, their impact is still much smaller than that of these two women, solely because these two, another Harmony unit by extension, can be used with other damage dealer, given they are generic enough, and they can give a substantial boost to other and less used damage dealer performance. I'm sure my yapping and beating around the bush probably has you confused, so let me give you an example of what I mean about balancing things around X but not using X as a baseline. If you've been playing gacha game for a long time, you have probably heard of a small, well, compared to miHoYo IP that is, gacha game called Arknights. A brief introduction to Arknights for anyone who has never heard of this game. It is a tower defense game that prides itself in you can clear the stage however you like. While it is an extremely exaggerated tagline because realistically you can use, let's say, a unit of 2 stars rarity and just clear most of the stage in the game. But it's getting pretty darn close to what it's trying to sell. That is not to say Arknights follow what I yapped about to a T. Arknights, like many other gacha games, has its own meta-breaking unit that easily warp the game and how developers design maps and enemies. For example, in the first year of Arknights, enemies have their defense stat increased just to give the player who used these two units any semblance of a challenge. It sounds really similar to Star Rail situation, but the difference is, Hyperglyph, Arknights developer, has consistently made sure that any event stage can be cleared by 4-star only team. Whether it's due to map design, enemy pathing, event gimmick, roadblock, as in actual roadblock, enemy amount per wave, etc, etc. There is some exception of course, like contingency contract with maximum difficulty where you need 6-star units or units that hyper specialize in that role. But that is the player sign up for this kind of deal, so no complaint here. Comparing games from different genres is stupid, but I wish Star Rail developers would have a similar design philosophy to Hyperglyph. And with how Star Rail is designed, I'm afraid that probably won't become true in the foreseeable future. Because of one thing that presents in every miHoYo games, the almighty DPS check. I am an avid DPS check hater, a sentiment I believe many share. Not only it pushes player into a narrow view of bigger and or higher number equal good, it also limits developers' creativity for new game mode, bosses, and enemy design. Don't believe me? Let me summarize all of Star Rail endgame content in 7 words or less. Ready? DPS checks in different scenarios. And you know what? Let's go a step further and do a in nutshell breakdown of each different mode. MOC, clear both sides within 10 cycles. Yes, total cycle in MOC is 30, but because of the reward, it is effectively a 10 or 20 cycles limit. Pure Fiction, score a total of 60,000 points from both sides. Each side has 4 cycles. Also, it is an AoE unit's favorite game mode. Apocalyptic Shadow is more of the same but boss fight. They just give some pretty dress and makeup to the ugly face that is DPS check. It might not have a clear cycle numbers, but you are still limited by this value and the core score, and every boss in Apocalyptic Shadow has a steadfast guard buff, so your most effective damage window is only during the boss are broken, TLDR, another tight damage window within a DPS check based game mode. But, to miHoYo credit, bosses in Apocalyptic Shadow has some interesting mechanics to help break boss toughness bar, after which the buff or gimmick will be triggered. This way can enable some fun or niche team comp to be used, and somewhat align with the ideal design philosophy. But Apocalyptic Shadow is just one game mode. The other two are, well, it's not that good to put it lightly. While it's true that MOC and Pure Fiction have buff or gimmick to help player clear their respective game mode, but unlike Apocalyptic Shadow, you can't really control when the buff or gimmick will be triggered. All of those things I mentioned could lead the player into thinking, maybe I might just need these characters, or God, this is such a effing character check game mode. Now, before you say, but you don't need those units or skill issue, Lamau. Let me say this, miHoYo is running gacha game business. They have the incentive to psychologically influence player into wanting to pull and potentially spend money on the limited characters or gears banners in order to make a profit. You don't need those units, true, but that doesn't make what I said not a manipulative tactic. And when the endgame content is mainly DPS check, there is only so much developers can do to push the limit or the system, especially when the game barely provides any option for players to make any dynamic gameplay or some niche but fun strategy. In the finished JRPG or any RPG for that matter, you have other choices than just normal attack and using skill. You also have options to defense and use item, which, let's be honest, it's more or less a skill with a hard limit. Then there is a unit's weakness to concern about, adding more layers to combat encounters. But in Star Rail you only have like, what? 4? Normal attack, skill, talent, and ultimate. I guess there is technique too, but that depends on player charitability or how relevant is that unit technique, to be honest. But I am not going to count it because it is not an in-combat option. miHoYo intentionally lessen player options in order to make a profit out of those options have a permanent ramification in this game, and it's even worse than Genshin. That ramification is of course HP inflation. Well, I kinda skipped over some steps. But as one of the Genshin could never crowd, I'll say this. Genshin did a good job on the HP inflation front. Although there's still some fucked up boss design and characters kit design to nudge player into pulling every new limited units, but I digress. The step I skipped was this. Your option in any combat encounter is limited by what characters you put in the party. But this is not a new concept. It's been this way forever since JRPG or RPG can find a footing. Every unit has their own role. Of course, they are going to provide you different options. But as I mentioned earlier, Star Rail doesn't have item or any other option to be used during combat encounters. Items, console items to be precise, in J/RPG, while can be powerful, it can't really substitute the actual unit of that role due to its nature of being a one-time use resource limited by the amount you can carry or find. What it can do is offer player choices to alleviate the need of that role, skill, buff, debuff, or any particular needs the combat encounter required, and thus gives you, the player, more options on how to engage in difficult combat encounters. An option to just guard or defend can give the player another possible layer of gameplay depth. To prove that I wasn't talking off my ass, just try to do one playthrough of any Pokemon games and one playthrough of any Megaten or Modern Persona game, then compare how different it is. Although it's kinda unfair to Pokemon because of Megaten and Persona Press Turn and one more system respectively, but just look at how give more option to player can increase depth and potential of encounter design. I'm feeling I was going off topic. Okay, but what I try to say is, because of the lack of in-combat option in Star Rail, player's option is directly tied to their selected party roster. Therefore, any unit that can provide many things like these two archetype fluid supports will be sought after, since there is only 4 slots in one team. So, when they open the floodgate, that is the release of Teal Woman, and let the water out of the dam, that is the release of White Woman, it is the beginning of what's to come. Since the game can't just be stuck on a couple of particular units for a really long time, because money, duh, the newer Meta Breaker support is likely going to be even crazier than the cute war crime committing idols and the hot psychopathic crime against humanity committing scientists. Like I said earlier, any unit that can use these two, or even these two, will see their usage and performance skyrocketed. But any team or any DPS that can't fit them into the team will fail off. Okay, to be fair to the game again, just these two indigenous broken supportive colors aren't really enough to make every unit that can use them fall off. But a nature HP inflation can. One thing I forgot to talk about in DPS check heading section is the cycle usage eligible for a reward in in-game content. In this case, it is MOC. Dear Honkai Star Rail developer team, if you have 30 cycles in MOC, why not take the advantage of 30 cycles and create a game mode to fit with the allotted time instead of relying on DPS check to induce FOMO in the players? Why limit to just you have to clear within 10 cycles to earn all rewards? There is so much possibility for MOC as a rotating content. Survival, defend objective, boss rush, puzzle light encounter, etc, etc. The sky is your limits! As for the reward, just have some standardized go even 4-star units only team can achieve. If anyone can push even further to absolute limits like 0 cycles or no damage, no hit, that's a pure flex. Give them a unique profile icon or nameplate/mobile background as a reward. Gamers love this sort of flexing. This way, not only any older limited 5-star units are less likely going to be fallen off, but it can also be a chance to push for more diverse team comp, or let's say a more niche scenario might become more relevant. Since if a team of 4-star units can do it, a team of limited 5-star units will definitely be able to do it in an easier and more comfortable manners, and you just sell the idea of easier way or more comfortable ways. If you are worried about miHoYo's financial situation in this hypothetical scenario, because miHoYo is totally a small indie game developer company, let me point out to Arknights is to make millions despite being the most generous gacha game out there. There is more stuff to talk about, like their usual refusal to buff older units, but honestly, it's beyond the dead horse right now, so I'm not gonna dwell on it. And other stuff I probably forget about. If you think there are more factors related to the topic at hand, or there is more things that can make the HP inflation situation even worse, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm still not well versed in star rail math, calculation and many things regard to theory crafting, so it is likely that I am going to miss a lot of topics that are even more concerning than these surface level topics. Thank you so much for bearing with my rant until this point. That's it from me. I hope you guys will have a good night and a great day ahead of you every day throughout the next years. Happy New Year! Also, I'll see you again in the next video. Bye bye!